All right, before I get to all of the breaking news today, and there is a lot, I want to take a minute and I want to say something. I have never witnessed a speech on the U.S. Senate floor that was as powerful as the speech today given by Senator Collins of Maine. Her remarks today. I've been in talk radio now 30 years. Tomorrow, incidentally, I begin my 23rd year here at the Fox News Channel. It was, frankly, the best speech I ever witnessed in the U.S. Senate. It was an example on how all senators should make decisions and conduct themselves. Senator Collins was methodical, thoughtful, respectful, clearly did her homework, laid out her judicial philosophy, that of Judge Kavanaugh. She showed a grasp of the Constitution, Supreme Court precedents, and she gave a chilling and sad description of the environment that we're all living in today. It was truly a modern-day profile in courage. Frankly, I don't know Susan Collins, and I don't know her well at all. I don't get impressed that often, but the speech today, it frankly blew me away, and she should be proud. And frankly, it had a lot less to do with her decision, although that's very important in all of this, than the pure human decency, fairness, and process that she employed to get to her decision. Let's take a look.
Today, we have come to the conclusion of a confirmation process that has become so dysfunctional, it looks more like a caricature of a gutter-level political campaign than a solemn occasion. Judge Kavanaugh has received rave reviews for his 12-year track record as a judge, including for his judicial temperament. The American Bar Association gave him its highest possible rating. In evaluating any given claim of misconduct, we will be ill-served in the long run if we abandon the presumption of innocence and fairness. I listened carefully to Christine Blasey Ford's testimony before the Judiciary Committee. I found her testimony to be sincere, painful, and compelling. The four witnesses she named could not corroborate any of the events of that evening gathering where she says the assault occurred. None of the individuals Professor Ford says were at the party has any recollection at all of that night. The facts presented do not mean that Professor Ford was not sexually assaulted that night or at some other time, but they do lead me to conclude that the allegations failed to meet the more likely than not standard. Therefore, I do not believe that these charges can fairly prevent Judge Kavanaugh from serving on the court. Mr. President, I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
I have not always agreed with Senator Collins, and even some things she said in her speech I disagree with in terms of precedents and the law. That's not the issue. She bravely restored common sense decency to the U.S. Senate today and led by example. And she had to stand up to a very angry left-wing mob. And she stood for principles that make this country great, showed real courage. Now, she took this process from the very beginning seriously. She protected the sanctity of the U.S. Constitution, due process, presumption of innocence. And in doing so, she exposed what is the hyper-partisan, frankly destructive nature of so many smear merchants that exist on the left today. And by the way, there are some on the right, too. Senator Lindsey Graham, who's going to be joining us in a few minutes with Senator Ted Cruz, he also tonight deserves a lot of credit. His powerful moment, it lit a fire for truth, justice, and decency in this country. Many Democrats proclaimed their opposition to Judge Kavanaugh within seconds of his nomination. Others upended his hearings with endless interruptions, grandstanding, the worst of the worst. And then worst of all, many Senate Democrats actually went along with accusing Brett Kavanaugh of even being a rapist, a gang rapist. No presumption of innocence at all. Drugging girls routinely at parties. They called him evil, compared him to Bill Cosby. Men were told to sit down and shut up. They did this with zero corroborating evidence and based on 36-year-old claims that were backed up by nobody. The Republicans took this rightly serious. It's a serious topic. Lawmakers, some of them, they didn't care. They wanted to ruin a man's life and his reputation forever. And I'm pretty certain tonight, Brett Kavanaugh, his wife, his 2 young daughters, I'm sure they'll never be the same again. We as a country cannot reward this madness, meanness, insanity. Now, many on the left are lashing out at Senator Collins, predictably. An opinion website owned by Univision called Splinter published a piece entitled Bleep Susan Collins. It's all over the place. If you look, don't even read social media. You know, nutjob, so-called comedian Kathy Griffin, you know, the one that had the severed head of Donald Trump, telling Collins to go to hell tonight. And the official Twitter of the Women's March published this picture, calls Senator Susan Collins a, quote, rape apologist. This is so over the top, so despicably ugly and disgusting. Wouldn't many of these same people that claim to have a monopoly of compassion for women, minorities, human civil rights, wouldn't they be showing outrage if any conservative in this country ever said and did such things? It's a very dangerous time for this country. Weeks prior to her speech, Susan Collins had left-wing activists sending thousands of coat hangers to her office. They made threatening, derogatory calls to her staff. They tried to bribe her with a crowdfunding campaign. And an angry mob of left-wing protesters harassing senators all over Capitol Hill. This is now getting dangerous. Take a look.
Very much concerned basically with the sexual abuse that people have to endure, and very much concerned that we have to do something as a country.
Don't put a liar on the court. Don't put a liar on the court. Don't put a liar on the court. Don't put a liar on the court.
The system is corrupt, and that's why we disrupt. The system is corrupt, and that's why we disrupt. The system is corrupt, and that's why we disrupt. Leave women! Leave women! Leave survivors! Leave survivors! Leave women! Leave women! Leave survivors! Leave survivors! Leave women!
Now, let me say something. And I really believe the people should be close to their elected representatives. And it's sad what I'm about to say. Before somebody gets hurt or worse, these office areas of elected officials now need to be closed to the public. Sad, but it needs to happen. This is now dangerous and out of control. And of course, the left predictably acting out in ways on TV that are frankly unconscionable. In many cases on so-called news networks. Take a look.
When, not if, when Judge Kavanaugh helps them to chip away at civil rights, voting rights, women's rights, abortion rights. I don't think it's going to sit very well with the country.
Let's not forget these people would go to church and then go to the lynching after clothing themselves in morality. And that's what we're seeing today.
Clearly, the Republicans don't care about the truth. They didn't want an investigation into who Brett Kavanaugh really was. And that's what was gutless. But unfortunately, we are where we are. And this is a travesty for America right now. The problem with America right now is that we've lost a moral compass.
Now, for the last 22 days, we Americans, we have witnessed what is an unrivaled insanity, a madness that has taken over, and it is now shaking the very core principles that every one of us, doesn't matter about politics, should be holding near and dear to our hearts. Rule of law, due process, presumption of innocence. And Democrats, well, are we going to reward this behavior? Shouldn't people be facing consequences for what is reckless actions? Senator Feinstein, she may now be the subject of an ethics probe over who leaked Professor Ford's letter. Now a witness tampering investigation should take place after claims that one of Professor Ford's close friends, who she listed to corroborate her story, admitted to the FBI that she was being pressured into altering her statement. All of this aside, in 32 days, there is now, we've all learned something. there is something a lot more profound on the ballot than anybody is talking about or telling you. On the one side, we now have one party in America, and by the way, I want to purposely exclude Joe Manchin of West Virginia, that have become a party that has been overtaken by the far left. They don't even have room for Joe Lieberman in this party. Remember what they did to him in Connecticut? I've known Joe Lieberman for decades, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. We have now witnessed in 22 days a party that clearly stands for a type of government that is alien to everything that this country we love was founded on. A party rejecting and simply just hating what we all thought we agreed on. Core, basic, fundamental principles. Rejecting even our Constitution. Demanding full and complete conformity. If you don't agree, God help you. A party of blatant double standards that can remain totally silent about gross allegations against Keith Ellison and Bill Clinton. They can love the Clintons, but pretend to care about being the champions of women's rights. Obviously, selective moral outrage. It's a party that envisions their ideology and agenda spread through the courts. They want activist judges. They want legislation that they could never get past themselves done from the court. They don't want separation of powers, co-equal branches. This is what has made this confirmation process so political. It shouldn't matter tonight. There is zero gloating here, or I wanted Brett Kavanaugh to win because I thought he deserved the position, and I thought I'd agree with his judicial philosophy. I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, liberal, or conservative. What we have been watching the last 22 days in this country, this is not justice. And in 32 days from now, human rights will be on the ballot. Treating every American with fundamental fairness, respect, equal justice under the law, equal application of our laws, that is on the ballot in 32 days. You think of the sacrifice of our founders, our framers. In 32 days, after what we have now lived through, this will be about affirming American history and values that they all fought, bled, died for, sacrificed for us. Due process, presumption of innocence. Why is that ever political? Constitutional rights, civil liberties. In 32 days, we, the people, have a choice to reaffirm these values, these principles that so many brave men and women fought, many died for. Those who understood the values of freedom and justice. It made this country great, and it has served us well. In 32 days, this election is about preserving all that is good and right and just in this country and taking a stand for future generations, for our children, our grandchildren, because what we have witnessed unfold these last 22 days is absolutely the single most despicable display of guilt by accusation we have ever witnessed. In 32 days, this is also about your life. Right now, you ask yourselves, are you better off than you were 2 years ago? Because by every reportable, objective, discerning measure, this country is now in the middle of a recovery and boom that is the envy of the world. We learned today unemployment in America, the rate dropped to the lowest point in nearly 50 years, 1969. The Mets won the World Series. It's now 3.7%. We learned that Hispanic unemployment matched a record low. Add to that historic low unemployment for African Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace, and youth unemployment. Record low unemployment now in 14 states. Look at manufacturing. Manufacturing is now near an all-time high. 400,000 new manufacturing jobs, jobs that the last administration said were never coming back. Consumer confidence at an all-time high. 4 million of our fellow citizens, the forgotten men and women we talked about so much of in 2016, 4 million fewer on food stamps, 4 million new jobs created. That's 8 million Americans we have out of poverty. The promises of the president that he lists and he keeps, his tax cut, the largest in history, border wall construction, $3 billion already spent. He's keeping that promise. The promise on NAFTA that we'd get better trade deals, pulling out of Obama's catastrophic Iranian deal. Look at the progress we've made in the Korean Peninsula. I don't see missiles flying over Japan every other day. And by the way, he's opened up what will be the might and prosperity for all of America that could literally help bring about more peace than we ever imagined. And that is, of course, the engine of every economy. We have more energy, natural gas, oil, and coal than all these other countries combined. And for all you Never Trump Republicans tonight, I have a message for you. You had your way, none of this would have happened. And by the way, I'm talking about you so-called conservative Republicans who said, I'll never vote for Trump. Well, you can't take your victory lap tonight. You know who you are. You're the ones out there podcasting, writing books that no one buys, self-promoting yourself as pro-Trump, Johnny-come-latelys. Frankly, you owe real conservatives in this country an apology. Why? Because if you had your way, none of this would be happening. But tonight, as the horrific Kavanaugh confirmation process demonstrated, this election is about so much more than just undoing these incredible 2 years. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'll shout it from a mountaintop if I have to. The single most important midterm election in our lifetime.